Tim Lord, Hop Products Australia, and hope you guys all have a great time.
Thanks, David. Good morning, everyone. Good to be here and good to see all you enthusiastic people ready to have a big day talking about beer and brewing. As David said, my name's Tim Lord. I manage Hop Products Australia, so no prizes there for guessing what we do. We grow hops. We have a couple of large farms in southern Australia, one in Tasmania, one in Victoria. Those farms produce in the vicinity of 1,000 to 1,200 tonnes of hops. We supply the bulk of the hops that go into commercial brewing in Australia, and we export about 60% of what we produce. HPA is part of the Bath-Haas Group. I don't know if anyone's heard of that name, but that involves other hop growing companies and hop trading companies which are in Germany and America. So collectively as a group we handle something in the vicinity of 35% of the world's hop trade. But today what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to show you a quick DVD which for those that have never had the opportunity to visit a hop farm gives you a quick step-by-step process of hop growing on our scale, and then I will talk a bit more about some of the varieties and what we're doing. We're causing quite a lot of interest overseas at the moment because we've bred a number of new varieties in recent years. Well, it goes back a couple of decades actually, and we've got a number of new varieties we're now referring to as flavour hops, and these are hops which give you a very, very distinct flavour as opposed to aroma character in your beer. And you've got a couple of samples of those in your show bags here today, and I'll talk briefly about those later on. But firstly, just to get things moving, if we can put that DVD on. I guess it would be appropriate to give a bit of commentary through this. I mean, this is a process that takes place early in the spring. So this is down at Bushy Park Estates in Tasmania. We've got about 250 hectares of hops in there. We use a Koya string that we import from Sri Lanka, so it is fully biodegradable. Every string is tied off by hand. There's 1.5 million strings there, tied off by hand, and then every string is dipped in around the base of the hop plant, which provides the structure for the hop plant to actually grow on.
You're going to point down anyway.
Here we are training the hops, tying the hops. We're typically putting about 3 binds per string, and there's typically about 3 strings per plant. So each hop plant might send up 50 to 100 shoots, but of those we will only typically put onto the string about 9 or 10 of them. So that's the process that we're actually going through currently in Victoria and Tasmania. This process, as you see there, actually training the hops onto the strings. So it's a view over Bushy Park. Hop growing on this scale for us requires very deep, fertile soil, lots of water, lots of fertiliser.
You know that you like them. Yes. You just take it like this move.
With the hop plants, once they start to grow, they can grow very, very quickly. They can grow 10 centimetres overnight or more. providing they've got enough water and nutrient. We use primarily overhead irrigation on these farms, but we are putting in a lot of drip irrigation these days. About those little yellow glands in there, the lupulin glands. And most people here would be familiar with that term. They're the little sacs in the hop that actually contain the alpha, beta acids and essential oils. There's already been a tractor with a cutter on it go through underneath the hops and cut them off about just under a metre above the ground, so then they're just swinging freely on the trellis. Then this top cutter comes through, obviously, as you can see, and cuts them off and pushes them into the trailer. Historically, all this was done by hand, so it certainly speeds things up some and makes it a whole lot safer. Here the hops are going into the picking machine, the American style Vanhauer picking machine. We've got 2 of these, so we can unload six of those trailers at a time. The bines go in upside down and really just a head of fingers that just strip all the hops, and as you can see, quite a lot of leaves off the vine. Vines then come through and fall down a chute and get chopped up and go for composting. And the hops fall down through onto these trays, or dribble belts as they're called, so we can clean the hops, primarily just separating the weeds from the hops, and the leaves and the stems from the hops. It helps the leaves are flat, hops around. They can use gravity pretty much to separate the two, bands in there. So we've got pretty extensive belt system or cleaning system here. Our customers typically have fairly tight specifications on the amount of leaves, stem or extraneous matter as they call it, that they do not want to see in their hops. If they're buying hops, they want hops, not stems and leaves. So depending on the size of the cones, how heavy they are, the variety they are, we can increase the speed or the angle of these belts to ensure we get a nice clean stream of hops from the picking area. Then the hops are fed up into our kiln. Got a kiln bed loaded. That's one side. That's one side. Same on the other side of the powered by LPG and dried predominantly at around 60 degrees centigrade. We have been doing some work drying some of our aroma varieties at lower temperatures. But most of the crop is dried in that 55-60 degree area. We then pull the hops from the kiln floor, and at this point we can start blending the hops. The hops growing on different areas of the farm. We are always working to produce a homogeneous product, so there's a lot of blending goes on. There's 2 floors being blended here as it goes down into a conditioning room. So each floor of hops takes around 8 hours to dry, get them from about 75-76% moisture down to a 8-10% moisture level. So we don't dry them out completely, we do retain some moisture so they don't get brittle. Here the hops are all pressed into 115 kilo, 110, 115 kilo bales. At that point we're checking the moisture and alpha. Skip fairly quickly across the pelleting process, so we actually grind the hops before we pellet them into a fine powder, and then they run through a pellet plant to produce what's known as the Type 90 pellet, which is the predominant form that we sell our hops in. All right, well hopefully you enjoyed that. For those that haven't been to a hop harvest, as you can see, it's a bit hard to describe that just with a talk, so I thought it might be good just to pop that up and everyone can have a look at it and just see what our world of hops looks like. I mentioned before that HPA has been breeding hops in Australia for many, many years. We currently grow 12 commercial varieties of hops. We are growing some imported varieties, Cascades, Willamettes, Millennium and Cluster, which are probably a name most of you would be familiar with. But then we have our varieties which we've produced in Australia, which includes things like Pride of Ringwood, Super Pride, Helga, Silver, Summer, Stella, Topaz and Galaxy. Now, and I think you've got the sample of the Topaz and the Stella in your goodie bag there today, so I'll talk a little bit more about that, but just a bit about why we've gone to the trouble of developing our own varieties. When hops were when they originally came to Australia from England, the varieties grown were predominantly Fuggles, Golding and other English hops. And they grew okay, but they didn't grow terribly well. We grew those, or they were grown in Australia for probably, it started in the 1830s, and it wasn't until the 1950s that they actually started some concentrated efforts with breeding. So for between the 50s and the 80s, all the focus was on breeding alpha acid. People were only interested in producing more alpha acid per hectare. That was probably our #1 goal. Yield is king. When you've got expensive inputs to grow a crop, you want to get as big a crop back as you can. So everything that was being chased in Australia was chasing more alpha acid, bitter hops. So yeah, and it was about developing varieties that would grow well in Australia. The hops are very, very sensitive to day length. I guess someone's going to be talking a little bit after me and talking about growing hops here in Queensland, which I'll be interested to hear. What we've been doing though is that we've been breeding hops for decades, which has meant that we've developed a sort of a new gene pool, if you like, of high alpha hops. Things like Topaz, which at its time when it was released was the highest alpha acid producing hop in the world. And by measures, I mean something like a Pride of Ringwood might produce 200 to 300 kilograms of alpha acid per hectare. whereas Topaz can produce more like 750 or 800 kilos of alpha acid per hectare, so you can sort of appreciate the measure of increase there. In the 80s, HPA also started working on some breeding aroma hops. We knew well, and we know now, that a lot of the aroma hops, the noble aromas from Germany, for example, Tettnang, Perla, Spalter, these sorts of varieties do not grow. They don't grow very well at all in Australia. They'll grow, but they don't produce much in the way of yield. So we started working on a program there, and then in the 90s we started. So what we ended up was a gene pool of high alpha hops, a gene pool of aroma hops, and then we've started systematically crossing those gene pools, and that's where the variety Galaxy came from. That was actually originally crossed in 1994. For those that have heard of Galaxy, that went into its first commercial brew in 2008, and now it's we're getting calls from all over the world. Can we get some, can we get hold of some Galaxy? So one of the things David asked me to talk about was when you've got a breeding program like that, and we typically, when we make our crosses, we'll get about 3,000 plants that might come each year. How do we go about determining which one we keep and which one becomes a good hop for brewing? It's not an easy process, and it's a very long process. First of all, we get the seeds from the hops. I think everyone probably knows that hops have male and female plants, so we cross the male and female plants, we collect the seeds, we grow those for a number of years, and we test them chemically, we see how they grow agronomically, and we start thinning them out and making choices as to which ones we'll keep. One of the things that we've done differently in recent years is started getting the brewers a lot closer to our breeding program. It's a bit like when you make a beer, you can measure it in lots and lots of different ways. You can measure its colour, you can measure its alcohol, you can measure 100 different parameters, but if it doesn't taste good, you're not going to drink it. It's a bit like that with breeding hops. We can measure them, they can have all the right chemical profile, they can grow magnificently on the farm, but if they don't make good beer, then no one's going to buy them, pretty obviously. So that's what we've been doing, is getting the brewer a lot closer to what we are doing, running a lot of trials, brewing a lot of beers, and it can be, we can test. We've had hops that we've had coming through our breeding program for probably 6, 7, 8 years, and it wasn't until we've actually bred with them, and I've tasted beers that are bred with hops made from sisters, for example, and one of them's delicious and one of them's you just go and find that hop and pull it straight out. It just tastes so bad. So very important part of what we do. So just on to some of the varieties that we've got here today, the Topaz and the Stella, which are in your bags. I think a number of people probably are not familiar with these hops. Start with Topaz. As I mentioned before, this was originally bred as a high alpha acid producing hop, but in recent times it's been used more so by craft brewers using it late in the process to make good beer. Topaz has got a lineage which includes Sarts, Golding, Brewer's Gold, Northern Brewer, and Y Northdown. So it's a big yielding hop. But it's getting recognised these days for sort of light tropical fruit characters that it contributes to beer. And I've written here, overlying an earthy sort of background, which is reminiscent of that sort of Fuggle Golding style of hop. And the other one that's in that bag is Stella. This is one of the very new hops that we've developed. This one is crossed with the German Spalter. And this one gives a really pleasant, round, hoppy, floral sort of character. It's got a slight spiciness to it. It's got hints of star anise, and you get these at quite low levels of oil addition. And then at higher rates of addition, or if you're dry hopping, you can expect it to give you some grapefruit or tropical fruit type of characters. So there's some of those hops there, and I think we might even have some other samples that we can have a look at later on during the course of the day. My message to you all today is that I think you should play with your hops. even though hops are described as having certain characteristics, and you'll be used to hearing the terms, this is an alpha hop, this is a bitter hop, this is an aroma hop, you know, typically, historically more so, people said, well, if it's a bitter hop, you put it in at the start of your beer making process, and if it's an aroma hop, it would typically go in much later. These hops that we've got here, you'll see that the alpha acid levels on them are quite high, the oil levels are very high, and so they don't fit necessarily into an alpha as a bitter hop or as an aroma hops, and that's why we've actually created, or we've referred to them now as flavour hops. So when you're calculating for bitterness, it's a fairly straightforward process. Most of you here would have some sense of feeling for how you make your calculations to bitter your beer. But it's a bit different for flavour and aroma. It's not so easy, and sometimes relatively small changes to the time of addition or the rate of addition, or even using flours versus pellets of the same variety can often make a big difference to the end result. So the point is that with each hop variety we'll present different flavour characteristics in beer depending on the time of addition, the amount of addition, the brewing regime you use, and the beer matrix itself. If you use a certain hop variety in a certain way and you put it in a light lager, and then you use that same hop variety in a heavier beer, it will present differently. So you need to think about it, you need to play with your hops, you need to mix it up, you need to not necessarily throw the rule book out, but use them in different ways, and you will get different experiences from them. So yeah, that's basically all I really wanted to, point I wanted to get across. I didn't really want to get into anything too technical today. I'm going to be here for the rest of the day and this evening, so if anyone would like to have a chat about hops, or if you've got any questions more specifically about using hops or different ways of using them, or even the varieties that are out there now, by all means, let me come and have a word. So, thanks, David.